Hi everyone. Um, this presentation is brings you the last part of population characteristics, and we have already completed the uh, population size and population density as the attributes of population. So the rest of the characteristics will be dealt in this presentation. As per the syllabus, you're supposed to learn population, the different attributes of population. Um, the attributes which we have already learned is population density, natality, mortality, um, migration, immigration, and um, immigration. So what we are going to uh, discuss in this presentation will be age distribution, biotic potential, environmental resistance, and carrying capacity. The two different population growth forms, the J and the S-shaped curves. Okay. So the last presentation we dealt with population size and population density, and we saw that the four primary attributes or parameters which influenced the population size and density were natality, immigration, and mortality. Where natality and immigration act positively influence the population size, that is, with an increase in natality and immigration, there would be increase in population size, while mortality and immigration had a negative influence on population size, that is, with increase in mortality and immigration, the population size decreased. So there will be a decline in population. So here are the three what you call situations where these parameters are going to influence the population size. So when immigration represented as I and natality represented as N, they summed up the sum of these two is more than immigration E and mortality M put together. There is population growth. So there is an increase in population. So with respect to time t, there is an increase in population size p. Okay, so that is population growth. Now in the second situation, it is like the immigration and natality put together, it is equal to immigration and mortality summed up. So in that condition, it is known as that condition results in population stability. That means there is no decrease or increase in population. You can see the graph over there that along the time population time graph, you can see there is a wavy graph. It's not a straight line. Why so? Because there will be whatever number is added to it, added to the population, by the mortality and immigration, the same, almost similar number will be reduced. So there will be an increase and the same amount is decreased along the negative way. So that gives a wavy graph. It's not a straight line graph, it is a wavy graph. But when it is taken along a longer period of time, an average, the population is almost at the same size. So it is known as population stability. Okay. In the third graph, you can see that immigration and mortality is more than the natality and immigration. So there is a more number of individuals being taken out from the population by way of immigration and death. So what happens is there is a population decline. So the graph is just the opposite as was found in the first graph. Okay, so there is a population decline. So these are the three situations uh, resulting from the interaction of the four primary parameters influencing the population size and population density. Yeah. So we saw that the population size with respect to time, it shows changes. It could increase giving a population growth. It could decrease giving a population decline, and it could be in a wavy graph representing population stability. Okay, so this is where a new concept was introduced, biotic potential, and that term was coined by Chapman in 1928. And the term was the concept was defined as the inherent capacity of an organism to reproduce, to survive, increase in numbers. That is, when all the environmental conditions are favorable, every population do have the inherent capacity to increase in number. Okay, so it all the conditions should be favorable, and utilizing all these favorable conditions, it could increase in number. So biotic potential is a natural capacity of a population to increase at its maximum rate under ideal or highly favorable environmental conditions and stable age and sex ratio. That is, more number of reproductive individuals or individuals having the potential to reproduce should be there in the population. So that can also increase the biotic potential. It is otherwise known as a reproductive potential. Biotic potential. It is also known as reproductive potential. So the biotic potential for any species is very high if unchecked, that is, if it is not controlled by any environmental parameters. So the number of any species will quickly overrun the world. For example, if all the eggs laid by a particular species of butterfly, it hatches out and forms a larva, and all the larvae it develops into butterflies. What happens is the whole world get completely overrun by the particular butterfly, isn't it? So there is actually in natural condition, in a real condition, in actual condition, what happens is such kind of biotic potential cannot go for a longer run. What happens is there will be environmental resistance. That is, there will be a check on this kind of biotic potential. Okay, so in nature, full biotic potential of a population is never achieved, or it is never realized, since these environmental conditions, biotic or abiotic, can bring about check on the increase in population. When there is a huge increase in population, there would be competition among the individuals of the same species for food, for space, for what you call mating, etc., etc. Okay, so that is one factor. Now there is certain other biotic factors like predators, that is parasites. They can also bring about check on the biotic potential. Another feature is the abiotic factors, environmental factors. So when there is competition for food, the food becomes what you call scarce resource. So that can bring about checks. So some of them die, some of them may die off because of hunger, or some of them may move out in search of food from the particular population. Then there could be drought. There could be like floods, which can bring about death of individuals, like temperature fluctuations, any other accidents, etc. All those are considered as environmental resistance. Okay, it could be abiotic factors or biotic factors. So environmental resistance that bring about a check on the biotic potential could be any biotic or abiotic factors. The biotic factors include pathogens, parasites, predators, that is diseases, parasitism, and being preyed upon. Okay, or abiotic factors, it could include like non-availability of food, space, then like natural calamities like drought, floods, temperature fluctuations, etc. Okay, so all these what you call checking factors, or what you call inhibitory factors, put together form the environmental resistance. Okay, um, so they increase in numbers. It is controlled by the factors, uh, both physical, biological, abiotic, biotic, and these factors are referred as the environmental resistance. So we can define it environmental resistance as the sum total of physical and biological factors that prevent or check the biotic potential. Okay, generally smaller organisms have faster birth rate. That is, with a particular specific time, the population size increases more in smaller sized animals than in larger animals or larger organisms. If conditions are totally favorable, even the slowest breeders, that is, even the larger organisms, multiply quickly. Okay, so that is what we said, that biotic potential is always very high for any organism. Okay, and the difference between the biotic potential and the rate of the increase, we can see it in like actual laboratory or field conditions, it is taken as a measure of environmental resistance. Okay, so environmental resistance we get it by finding the difference between the biotic potential and the rate of actual increase. That is how it is increasing. So the actual increase is in the size of the population can be determined by the delicate balance that exists between biotic potential and environmental resistance. So biotic potential is highly ideal, okay, and that is actually in natural condition it never happens. But in what do you call normal condition, in natural condition, it is environmental resistance can bring about the check to biotic potential. Environmental resistance is often low when a population is introduced into a completely new area for the first time. That is, um, so uh, so as the population increases in number, the environmental resistance also increases in the form of predation, competition, what you call scarcity of food, lack of space, etc. So consequently, this results in the decline of the size of population. So you can see in the graph, initially the green line, isn't it, the green curve? You can see it takes some time. Actually, that is the time when the population gets adjusted to the surroundings, when it is introduced for the first time. And then once it is introduced, once it is getting adapted to the environment, there is a shoot of the population size. So there is a very high increase, exponential growth we call. Okay, so it increases in number. What is exponential growth? So when there is initially maybe like four individuals, when it is undergoing exponential growth, it becomes 16, right? And then 256. So likewise, it increases, right? So it increases in exponential form. So it increases in size, and then it reaches a particular level above which the population size cannot increase, and that particular level, it is known as carrying capacity. Carrying capacity is referred as the maximum number of individuals of a population that can be supported by a habitat or an ecosystem at a particular given time. Okay, so once the population reaches the carrying capacity, uh, there cannot be further increase in the population size. So what happens is the population size, it fluctuates around the particular level. Okay, and it becomes almost stabilized. So carrying capacity can be defined as the uh, population size, um, or you can see maximum number of the individuals that can be supported by a particular ecosystem. What is that supporting the individuals? Actually, only at that particular population size, all the individuals will be getting sufficient amount of food, water, space, for every other favorable resources required for the survival. Okay, so above that, what happens is it is going to affect the individuals of the population. So carrying capacity is the maximum number of individuals that can be taken care by a particular ecosystem. Okay, so when a population reaches the carrying capacity of its environment, the population cannot grow further. So the growth rate, it almost becomes zero. Okay, there is no further increase. So the population generally stabilizes around the carrying capacity. Stabilizes doesn't refer that it is going to have same number. It fluctuates around an average. So the carrying capacity is of the environment for a population depends on many uh, components. Okay, depends upon the what you call the animal species or the organism, depends upon the environmental conditions. So all the environmental conditions, all the ecosystem types of ecosystem will not be having the same carrying capacity for a particular species. So I hope the connection between biotic potential, carrying capacity, and environmental resistance, it is clear to you. Okay. So here there is a graph which shows like two curves where the blue curve, it shows there is a very fast increase in the population size, and it increases without any limit, isn't it? It keeps on increasing. The size keeps on increasing with respect to the time. So number of generations represents time, and population size is given on the y-axis. So here you can see it keeps on increasing, isn't it? So it is so drastic that it actually jets off the carrying capacity level. Now this is what is referred as the biotic potential. So with due to the biotic potential of individuals, there is a population size increase without any check, fine. But in natural condition, this is not going to happen, because what happens is when there is growth without limitation, there would be it is very ideal, and such conditions never exist on earth. Okay, and when if this keeps on increasing, at a particular point there could be a huge population crash, that is a huge mass death can occur. So that is what it affects. So this kind of a growth curve is what is referred as the exponential growth curve, which we will be discussing it in detail later. Right. Another one is where the red curve, you can see initially both the curves start in the same trend, isn't it? Then what happens is it reaches the uh, K. It is written, isn't it? It is the carrying capacity. Okay, carrying capacity. It reaches the carrying capacity of the particular environment, and then what happens is the environmental resistance comes into play. So the population cannot further increase. So when there is an increase above the carrying capacity level, there will be environmental resistance, for example, predation or parasitism or diseases. So the curve comes down below the carrying capacity. Okay, now the environmental resistance will be less because the population has come down. Now what happens? It increases population, the growth increases and grows above the carrying capacity. Now the environmental resistance also increases, and it checks the population. There will be death, so it comes down again. The growth curve comes down again below the carrying capacity. So such kind of fluctuations is seen. That is around the carrying capacity, the population growth curve, it keeps on fluctuating, and that is what is referred as the population stabilized population. I hope this is clear. Okay, so here it is just listing of the factors that contributes to the carrying capacity. Okay, or you can see a collection of environmental resistance, right? So it is food and water availability. So individuals will be competing. If there is huge number of individuals, there will be competition for food and water. Space for territories and nesting. Obviously, we have already seen territories, and the larger animals need usually mark the territories. So they need spaces. Larger the animal, larger the territory. So such kind of competitions will be there. So the stronger one will actually like remove the smaller ones from the environment. Then availability of mates. So during breeding season, there will be huge competition. There will be and the end result of competition will be death of the weaker ones. Now, diseases, predation can bring about population decline. The environmental change, temperature change, then wind pattern change, etc., can also bring about the environmental resistance. Then, at certain situations, for example, you have studied about the succession, completely new area on a rocky surface. What happens is on a rocky surface, if the first kind of organism which establishes it is, just imagine it is a lichens. Okay, so lichens during its growth, it releases certain chemicals into the onto the rock, which brings about chemical change in the environment. And these chemical changes cannot actually, it will not allow the lichen itself to survive for a longer period of time, but instead bring about certain changes that help in the successive establishment of another set of population or organisms. Okay, so that can also happen. That is toxic products. Products toxic to a population. Okay, that can affect the population. Then injury or accidents. Then senescence, that is death from age-related illness. Okay, it is not other death, it is senescence. So all these are considered to be the factors which contribute to the environmental resistance, and thus keeping the population at the carrying capacity level. So whatever we are discussing, it was based upon the graph which where we plotted population size against time, isn't it? So when population size is plotted against time, what we get is a population growth curve. Okay, that is known as a population growth curve. And the curve, such a curve, it helps in studying the trend in population growth along a period of time. So the growth is a we can see that it is dynamic. So population dynamism can be studied, and population what do you call it? The specific growth of a population, it can be represented by the population growth curve. Okay, so there are two kinds of population growth curves. One is the sigmoid curve, and the other is the um, J-shaped curve. Sigmoid curve is otherwise known as S-shaped curve. So we have two growth curves, two types: S-shaped curve as well as the J-shaped curve. So we will be looking into it in detail. Okay, so these are the two curves which we referred. The first one, as the curve itself shows, it is somewhat like the letter J, isn't it? J-shaped curve. And the second one is a S-shaped curve or the sigmoid curve. Okay, so when resources are in plenty, are unlimited, when there is no checking or no resistance on the population exhibit J-shaped growth curve. Okay, so here what happens is there is unchecked growth of the population. So the population size, it keeps on increasing uh, uh, based on their biotic potential, right? And this usually happens in when we rear like yeast, bacteria, etc. in laboratory conditions. We keep the medium provided; it will be ideal enough for the like biotic potential to be achieved. Now, the second one is the S-shaped curve. S-shaped curve is when resources are limited, in the sense there is sufficient environmental resistance checking the biotic potential. So what happens is the population, it curves off along the carrying capacity level. Okay, so in the S-shaped curve, the population size, population growth, actually it decreases as the resources become scarce. That is, as the population increases, the resources available for each individual become reduces, and so at a point, what happens? It levels off. That is, there is no further increase when the carrying capacity of the environment is reached. Okay. Now the J-shaped curve is otherwise known as exponential growth curve. So because there is a logarithmic increase in the population size, while the second one is known as the logistic growth. Okay. So these are the two different types of population growth. Okay. So we can see the S-shaped population growth curve in detail. When a population is first introduced into a completely unoccupied area, it increases in an S-shaped fashion, or what we call as a sigmoid fashion or the logistic fashion. Okay, here what happens is the growth curve shows five different phases. The first phase is the lag phase. Second, positive acceleration phase. Third, exponential phase or log phase. Fourth, negative acceleration phase. Fifth, stationary phase or a plateau. Okay, so what are these actually? Now, lag phase is where when individuals are introduced for the first time into a completely unoccupied area, the individuals have to get adapted to the environment, isn't it? So during this lag phase, the individuals adapt themselves to the environment, to the new environment. So the population growth is very slow. Okay, so it is actually the time taken. The lag phase is actually the time taken by the individuals for getting adapted. Once it get adapted, there is a slow increase in the population size. Okay, and that is what is seen in the positive acceleration phase. So the curve increases slightly. Okay, the curve just bends like up slightly, right? That is a positive acceleration phase. Now, once it picks up the increase, then there is a rapid rise in population due to availability of food and all other requirements that is required for the survival of the organisms. And initially what happens is there is no competition. The individuals are very less in number, and there is sufficient space and food available for them. So that phase is what is referred as the log phase or exponential phase. That is a rapid increase in the population. Now, once this increase picks up, what happens is it reaches a particular level where the population size is so high that there is some competition between, or what you call, a competition among the individuals of the population for food, water, space, etc. There could be more predation, parasitism, diseases, etc. So what happens? That is, environmental resistance increases. So as the population increases along the exponential phase, environmental resistance increases, and this brings about the slow rise in the uh, population size. Okay, so during the negative acceleration phase, there is slow rise in the population as the environmental resistance increases. So later to the negative acceleration phase, the growth rate becomes almost stabilized because mortality and natality rates are almost equal to each other. That is, as many deaths occur in the population, that many number is introduced in the by birth or by reproduction. So there is, as such, the population growth is almost zero. That is, number introduced is same as number died. So a stable population is reached, or it is achieved. So it is in equilibrium, or the population size is in equilibrium, or what we call as a, it is at saturation level. There could be no further increase. Okay, this limit in population is actually the carrying capacity K. Fine, and it is imposed by the carrying capacity of the environment. Now, S-shaped curve is also called as logistic curve, and it was actually described by the ecologist Verlust in 1839. Okay, and here this what you call the population growth curve, it is represented by the equation given dn by dt is equal to rn into k minus n by k. Okay, um, actually dn by dt is actually the change in the population size. Okay, the rate at which the population size changes. Okay, with time, it is actually the population growth. Fine. R is actually the biotic potential, and N, it is the population size. Now, 1 minus N by K, it is the environmental resistance that checks the biotic potential and keeps the population stabilized at the plateau. Okay, so that is the S-shaped growth curve. Okay, here you can see the S-shaped growth curve in detail, right? So initially you can see the growth curve, the population, there is no very rapid population growth curve, growth in the early part of the graph. So that part is actually the lag phase, when the population is getting adapted to the environment. And once it gets adapted to the environment, it starts to use abundant resources, food, shelter, water, etc., for its increase. And during this time, since the population size is very less, the environmental resistance is also less or limited. Okay, now there is a rapid increase in population size, that is the exponential phase. So between the lag phase and the exponential phase, you can see a small upward curve, and that is what is being called as a positive acceleration phase. I hope it is clear. Positive acceleration phase. So you have initially the lag phase, which is almost parallel to the time, the x-axis. Then you have the positive acceleration phase, when the curve just curves upwards, and then the rapid increase is the exponential phase, which takes the population size to a very high number, almost close to the carrying capacity. Okay, then you can see the transitional phase. Okay, and that is what is the negative acceleration phase. So as the population continues to increase, there could be increased competition for the resources available. Automatically, since the population is increasing, the resources may have depleted, and then there is a huge number of individuals, and that can bring about mortality. Okay, so here what happens is mortality increases above the natality. So more number of deaths occur as compared to the birth, and this brings down or slows down the population growth or the rate of population increase. So that phase is known as the negative acceleration phase, and eventually it results in plateau phase or the stationary phase. Here what happens is the number introduced during by way of reproduction or natality is almost equal to the number like reduced by way of mortality, and hence the population growth almost becomes constant. And this is where the population size has reached carrying capacity of the environment. Okay, so when the population size is at this particular level, it is not static. It is not what you call, yeah, but it is dynamic. Okay, it keeps on oscillating or fluctuating around the carrying capacity level. That is, but on an average, it is almost stabilized. Okay, so that is the what you call sigmoid curve or S-shaped curve. Now, J-shaped population growth curve. J-shaped population growth curve, it is otherwise known as exponential, what you call, yeah, phase, growth in exponential fashion. Okay, now this is usually seen in algal blooms or certain insects. For example, we have seen the locust attack and all. So in those cases, it is J-shaped population growth curve. This type of growth curve is found only in certain situations or certain populations, and in the beginning, the population density increases rapidly. Okay, as in the case of exponential phase of the what you call S-shaped curve. Okay, and then it reaches usually it increases so there is a rapid rise in the population size that at a particular level it reaches a level where there is a huge competition, and then suddenly it stops and there is a rapid decline in the population size due to the environmental resistance and other limiting factors. And so there's a what you call a sudden drop in the this one population size. So it is initially characterized uh, it is characterized by a rapid growth in the population. It continues till most of the food is used up. Okay, and with increase in population, there is a corresponding decrease in the availability of food and space, which finally becomes completely used up. This leads to mass starvation and mortality. And this sudden increase in mortality cause is known as population crash. Okay, or sudden population decline is what is referred as a population crash. And this is seen in algal bloom, which you have already studied. Isn't it? There's a sudden increase in algal growth. When there is a huge amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium reaching water bodies, the algae it increases in population. So it uses up this what you call nitrogen, all those nutrients, and it grows flourishly. So this increase later, what happens is it reaches a particular level where the whole water body is completely covered by the algae, and then there is a competition for space, for oxygen, etc. And what happens is all of a sudden, the algae starts to decompose all together, and this brings about complete population crash, isn't it? And this can deprive the whole aquatic body out of oxygen, and this can even bring about death of all other animals living in the aquatic body. So that kind of you have studied about eutrophication and biomagnification, etc. So that is what kind of this is the J-shaped growth curve, which is actually exhibited by the algal blooms. And there are certain animals, lemmings of tundra. There also you can see there's a huge rapid increase in the population, and all of a sudden the whole what do you call animal population starts to decline all of a sudden, and there's a crash. Okay, so it shows a J-shaped curve. So this type of growth pattern gives the curve which indicates the catastrophic conditions. And you can see the this J-shaped growth curve is expressed by the equation dn by dt is equal to Rn. Here you can see the n minus k by n, that part it is completely absent. That is actually representing the environmental resistance. So here there is no environmental resistance acting upon. So it uses up the complete biotic potential of the population, and thus there is a logistic. I mean, there is a exponential increase. So last among the attributes of population is age distribution. Um, the age distribution actually influences both natality and mortality of a population. We are speaking about the population. Okay, so age structure is actually proportion of individuals in each age group. So, it was Bodenheimer in 1938 who divided the population into three ecological ages based upon the reproductive status, reproductive capacity of the members of the population. So he identified pre-reproductive stage, then reproductive age, and post-reproductive age. Now, the relative duration of these ages varies greatly in different organisms, isn't it? So, in maybe like lower organisms, the reproductive age may be very prolonged, but in higher animals, it may be, or larger animals, reproductive age may be very short. The reproductive period usually is restricted to a small part of the lifespan of the organisms, and this determines the population growth. Okay. And the proportion of the organisms in these three age groups within a population actually controls the rate of increase of the population. So, a population with a large proportion of young individuals grows more rapidly, right? While a population with more old individuals tends to decline. So a stationary population is one where all the age groups, ecological age groups, are almost evenly distributed. So these are the three phases where we can. These are the three situations where these age groups are. The proportion of these age groups vary. Okay, and the model representing the proportions of these age groups in the form of a pyramid, it is known as the age pyramid, right? So it was introduced by Bodenheimer. So here you can see three um, different age pyramids. The first one is where the post-reproductive age group is comparatively less, while reproductive age is the like highly represented group. Okay, so more number of reproductive individuals are present in the first population, and this is actually a young population, and there could be population growth in the future. Okay, in the second one, you can see the individuals belonging to reproductive and pre-reproductive age group. It is almost similar, and here you can see it is almost stable. So the proportion of the three age groups, it is almost even, so it is a stable population. Okay, so there is no further increase or decrease in the population size. In the third population, it is actually post-reproductive age group individuals are more as compared to reproductive and pre-reproductive. So what happens is, in the future, the population size will decrease. There will be a population decline. So the population size is affected by the ratio of the organisms of different sexes. Among the animals, there are a great variation in the number of male and female individuals. For example, so apart from the ecological age groups based upon the reproductive capacity, even the sex of the individual can also affect the population size. So in some cases, for example, insects like honeybees, a single female is responsible for reproduction, while all others are mostly sterile, isn't it? Worker bees are sterile. So the sex ratio also changes with age, since there are differences in the natality of the male and female individuals. So here we have seen that is reproductive capacity of individuals of a population, as well as the sex of individuals of the population. The proportion of the male and female individuals of a population can affect the population size, that is population growth. Okay, so the proportion of the what you call three ecological age groups as determined by Board and HEMA. So the proportion of three ecological age groups in a population and the proportion of male and female individuals in a population both do have influence on the increase in population size or the population growth.